Something soft and kind. And hey, babe, the sky's on fire. I'm dying, he dies. I'm gone to Carolina in my mind. I'm gone to Carolina. Can you see the sunshine? Can you feel the moonshine? Ain't it just like a friend of mine? Take me from behind. So as our participants are hopping on, we're going to have a poll question shortly, but I'd just like to say welcome to UDL IRN Campfire Chats, where tonight we will hear the perspectives from the students, parents, and teachers as we journey through this new uncharted territory. Hello, Dana. Hello, Kendall, Randy, Sergio, Shelby, Yoselin. Welcome. We're going to be starting momentarily. We just got a little James Taylor playing for us in the background. Classic campfire music. We're going to have a poll question pop up momentarily. We are interested in your input as we drive the new discussions. We'd like to hear from you and the formats that you prefer in future chats, future conversations around teaching and learning. So it is 8:01. I believe we're officially starting. And I would like to first welcome those who have joined. And for those watching at a later time, the recording version, we're glad that you're able to log in, and we hope you enjoyed today's session or tonight's session. The UDL IRN Campfire Chat featuring a conversation with students, parents, and teachers. Dr. Matt Love and myself are going to be introducing some data from a student survey. And if you see the Twitter handle in the bottom left-hand corner, feel free to follow on Twitter as well. And if you're watching this later, check out the Twitter chat, UDL IRN, hashtag. So I'd like to just take a few moments to kind of cover what the next 60 minutes may look like. We're going to review the findings of a recent student survey. If you haven't had a chance to complete that poll, looks like we have the poll still going. And after we review the findings of the survey, we're going to introduce our panelists, so they have a chance to weigh in and give us their perspective. We're going to ask a panelist a few key questions regarding the data that we've learned from the survey. And then we're going to open up the Q&A to the audience. As we move through the presentation, feel free to use the chat box to engage with any questions you might have, offer solutions and resources, or simply comment on something that resonates with you. So as we all know, education in the United States, as across the globe, has changed dramatically when schools across the country closed back in spring of 2020 and the students were asked to learn remotely. this right now is a critical opportunity to listen and to learn from students, lived experiences during this unprecedented time. So as we navigate the challenges, as the districts have some hard decisions to make right now and in their near future, we thought what's best than to ask our number one stakeholder, which is our students. So our students, their voices, they must be central to the way school is reimagined. So this evening, we'd like to do that. We're going to share some student data from the survey, the Youth Truth Students Survey. Students weigh in, learning and well-being during COVID-19. And we brought some guests we'll introduce shortly to ask them some questions as they can give us their perspective. But let me give you a little bit of background about this particular test that we're going to be sharing. This 12-minute online survey fielded from May 11th to June 19th in English and in Spanish was asked to 5th to 12th grade students. Age-appropriate questions about their school experience, social emotional development, and their well-being during this unprecedented time during the 2020 school closure. Over 20,000 students responded to this survey from 166 schools across 9 states. And we have Dr. Matt Love, who's a professor at the University of Jose, to walk us through some of the data before we bring our panelists on. Dr. Matt?
Sure. So to start, a lot of you are probably going to resonate or, have connections to some of the facts that we're going to share with you. And that's why we want to present it in a multifaceted way, right? Share some data from the survey, and then also allow some folks who are living through it in a variety of roles, whether it's parents, students, and teachers, to kind of share their experience, and then, help us along the way to start brainstorming solutions and future innovations as we move forward. So to start, let's go ahead and dig into what some of the findings from the survey were. Starting with the learning experience, just to go with what the slide said, when it comes to what students are learning, half said assignments were given to them that really helped them learn, but only 39% of students say they learn a lot almost every day. So thinking about that and digging a little bit deeper, there are clear divides in the experiences that A students versus D students, or students who typically get lower grades, rated in their learning experience. So thinking about our students who might have, experienced typical barriers in school, or students who might have engagement or apathy issues, they rated their learning experience differently than students who typically perform well in school. And then students who were also more affected by COVID-19, whether it's in their personal life or just by the transition to online learning, rated their experience for learning in lower terms than their peers did as well. So moving into the next topic of engagement, we'll see kind of how some of those areas overlap. Thinking about, working from home, a lot of us have had to do it in the last 6 months. Half of students said they were able to focus on their learning in a remote setting, and only 41% of students said they were able to motivate themselves to do schoolwork. Again, I think that's something a lot of us can relate to as we've been working from home, but it's going back to these core tenets of universal design that we want you to start thinking about, right? How can we get students engaged in any environment that we teach them in, and then understand that engagement across a variety of factors is going to be different. So again, digging a little bit deeper across cultural lines and background, students rated their ability to focus and engage in school a little bit differently. And then there were differences in students' motivation across age and grade levels. So we saw 5th and 6th graders feeling more positively about their ability to motivate themselves to do schoolwork. And then, in high school, we've all heard the term senioritis before. Our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders felt a little less motivated to, engage and dig into some of their schoolwork. And some of that might have had to do with relationships, which is what we're going to talk about next. So in reflecting on the relationships and that connection to school, 43% of student respondents said many or all of their teachers made an effort to understand what their lives were like outside of school. And imagine how that was a little bit different, when you had to figure out what does a student's home life look like when they're learning from home. So 43% said their students made an effort to understand that. And then 61% of students said many or all of their teachers were available to give extra help if they needed it. So as teachers, parents, and families and students were learning to work remotely and learn from home, 3 out of 5 teachers, according to students, were made available to them to give some of that extra help. If we think about our students in the margins, typically the students that might need some extra supports, we'd probably want to see that number be a little bit higher. However, students on average reported that this extra amount of help was actually more than usual. And I think all of us can commend the efforts teachers made in this transition to online learning. Additionally, 54% of students said that an adult, that they feel that there's an adult they can talk to at school if they're feeling upset, stressed, or having problems. So before we ever even get to the learning side, if there's an outside barrier, or we're focusing on student social emotional development, it's important that all students feel like there's an adult that they can go to for support if there's something that's serving as a barrier to academic learning, which kind of brings us to the next topic, which is obstacles to learning, which for students, this was probably the thing that a lot of us could see, realize, and understand, whether it was anecdotally and then now through this data, that 70% of students reported that there were obstacles in their virtual learning. And of the most highly reported, it was distractions at home, feeling depressed, stressed, or anxious. I've been in this room, it feels like, since remote work started, and it's pretty easy to feel isolated, stressed, or anxious. I just, I want things to be what I think they should be, back to normal. And for students, it's important to realize that they all went through some level of a traumatic experience, right? Their world was kind of flipped on its head. And obviously, if you have external stressors, focusing on academics is going to be a little bit more difficult. And when we dig into those numbers, we see that a higher proportion of female students and students who identify in other ways experienced feelings of depression, stress, or anxiety as an obstacle learning in higher rates than their male counterparts did. And then we also saw our students of color, students who are Black or Latino, face greater numbers of obstacles than did their peers who are white or Asian. So kind of seeing some of those underlying factors and barriers that exist in school kind of bearing themselves out more when we move to online learning. So thinking about those obstacles, those barriers that traditionally exist, we can look at student belonging and how that kind of bore out in online learning as well. So it's hard to feel like you belong in an environment when that environment is somewhat nebulous, right? So we're all sharing a space right now. You're here in the webinar with us, but I think it takes an extra level of interaction, an extra level of design and proactive consideration to build a space where every student feels like they belong or feel like they're involved or in that space. And in this transition to remote learning, belonging has suffered, and that's understandable. But only 1 in 3 students said they really felt like part of their school community and felt connected to school. And to kind of provide a visual to this, it broke down differently based on students' grade levels. So you'll see that there were significant differences where 5th and 6th graders reported feeling more a part of their school community, and our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders feeling less connected. So moving from left to right, left would be less connected, and on the right side of the spectrum, students are more connected. And we see a question in the chat: is there a legend for this data? Jared in the slides earlier had a link to the survey, and in a second we can go ahead and drop a full link to the survey in the chat, just so that you can have access to the full report. But just to kind of describe it to you now, left-hand side, less connected; right-hand side of the graph with students who felt more connected. So you see 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, upwards of 20% of them did not feel connected to their school. And, the numbers are a little bit lower in 5th and 6th grade where they're less than 10%. Either way, I mean, we want those numbers to be higher, but it's thinking about what can we do? What are some of our universally designed options for making adjustments or changing what we're seeing here? And that gets us into the health and well-being of students as well. So students mostly appreciated spending time on things that they like to do. I think that's all of us, right? I would show up to school to go to PE. That's just me being honest. And because I went to school for PE, I also attended English, math, and all of those other things because I had to. And because they had social options. But when we think about online learning, it's really mostly time where students reported that they felt they were there for class and their ability to connect with friends wasn't necessarily there. And they rated it the lowest on all items of the survey. And when we look at specific connections, male students tended to rate their health and well-being more positively than did female students or students who identify in other ways. And then additionally, males also rated more favorably in terms of spending time on things they like to do, such as getting enough physical activity and connecting with friends, than did their peers. So we also see that remote learning has a social component to it as well, and that students respond to it differently or did respond to it differently on the survey. So finally, looking at school logistics, again, it was a rapid transition. Some schools reported, they had a weekend to plan. On Friday, they were told, we're moving to remote learning on Monday. Be ready, have your class up and ready to go. And, while I'm not in the classroom anymore, I can't do anything but commend the effort that teachers made in just getting things up and running. And we're going to hear from some teachers and parents here in a second. But thinking about some of the barriers or obstacles that students faced in terms of these logistics, most were able to navigate the mechanics, such as logging in and turning in their schoolwork. But, we've heard anecdotally, we've seen it in the news, and I'm sure we've known people who have had issues with access. So students from low-income families, students who receive special education services, students who are emergent bilinguals or English language learners had less positive experiences when accessing, completing, and turning in schoolwork. So we see the issues of access, connectivity was a big issue for a lot of students. And then again, students who were most affected by COVID-19 struggled to complete some of their work. So we just wanted to start by painting a picture through some data, maybe lend some of the research side to the experience a lot of our attendees are feeling, those of you that are on now, those of you that are watching later. And we want to lead it into putting a face to what these numbers are saying. So I'm going to kick it over to Jared, who's going to facilitate the introduction of our panelists.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matt. We appreciate that. I also like to thank a couple behind the scenes people that made this possible tonight. Sue Harding, Kelly Culp, Janet Good, Mackenzie. We appreciate all your guys' hard work. And let's do a quick intro with our panelists. I'll go ahead and read your bio. And as I read your bio, feel free to give a wave. We are so glad and excited to have our students. So we're going to go first with our students here. We have Jeremy Schmidt with us to help answer some of these questions, the questions we're going to ask pertaining to some of the data. Hi, Jeremy. He's a 4th grade student. He's progressively improving in his technology skills. His parents are constantly impressed by his knowledge and ease with new technology. He has embraced online learning and has been very successful thus far, but would love to go back to school full-time in a heartbeat. He loves to be around other kids and engage with the staff. And I just so happen to know his teacher, Mr. McGuffey, which is me. I never did introduce myself at the beginning. And Mr. McGuffey absolutely loves this fine young man. He's an excellent student. Another student we have tonight, we're so glad who's been able to join us, is Malik Jackson. Malik is a ninth grade student at Fitzgerald High School, which is ranked one of the most diverse schools in Michigan. So he has some great input and insight to share with us. Malik considers himself an average student when it comes to technology, but yet he shared this year that it is a struggle, not only because he is an online student, but because it's his first year in high school as a ninth grade. Malik, thank you so much for being here tonight. You two are the number one stakeholder. What you have to say is extremely important. So we are here to listen to you and to learn from you. We have two fantastic teachers who have joined us tonight. Our first teacher, Elizabeth Schmidt. She is a teacher in Fraser for 21 years. She's currently teaching fifth grade in a hybrid setting. She's looking forward to face-to-face. Liz doesn't claim to be tech savvy, but working in a one-to-one district, she has learned to troubleshoot and successfully navigate many technology applications and tools. And out of 21 years, this fall has presented some of the most difficult challenges she has yet faced while teaching. As a fellow coworker of Liz, I can assure you that she's not only met those challenges, but she is a leader, a pioneer in reinventing teaching and learning. I'm also privileged to mention Mike Demetrol. I also have the opportunity and privilege to work with this man. He is an excellent teacher, a social studies teacher, and 21st century coach at Fraser High School. When asked, he says, I am by no means an expert in technology, but I do enjoy learning new ways of integrating tech into my lessons, and I enjoy sharing my experiences with my students and colleagues. He's not a fan of remote learning, but him and his teammate are definitely rocking it. We have two fantastic parents. We're also looking forward to their perspectives. Neil Rule is a television and radio sports broadcaster who's broadcasted for our very own Detroit Pistons here in Michigan. Neil is a husband to an educator, a father to a high school student, a middle school student, an elementary school student. So he has his hands full. He's very passionate about teaching and learning. And when asked about his level of tech savvy, he says, I can't work in your IT department, but I can figure technology out for the most part. He is not a fan of remote learning, and looking also forward to getting back face-to-face. Our last panelist, Christine Gray. Christine works as a receptionist and serves on the school board for Dove Academy of Detroit. And when asked about her tech savviness, she said, sledgehammer. Now, I'm not sure, that probably means a lot of different things. We won't get into that, but I love the fact that was your reply. She mentioned her overall experience of remote distant learning was great, but with the added responsibility of teaching her kids a new way of learning was hard for all of them. And I think the entire world resonates with that comment. Bottom line, we are all partners right now. It seems like parents are co-teachers. If there's ever been a time where we've all come together, parents, teachers, students, this is the time. So I'll go ahead and ask a series of questions here. And as if you're attending this chat, feel free to throw a question in the chat box if you have a question for a particular panelist. As we begin this conversation, if something resonates with you, feel free to comment on that. And of course, fire up the Twit chat. All right, so this first question is for Malik. Malik, we have all heard that online learning has been a struggle for families, students, and teachers. From the Youth Truth Survey, it was reported that only half of students said their teachers give them assignments that really help them learn. 39% said that they learned a lot every day. That's not a very large percent of students saying they learned a lot every day. What was your experience, Malik, in learning online?
It's not that. I mean, I am learning. It's just that it's a struggle, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we want. So it's a struggle to learn online. Talk to us a little bit more about that. What's the big struggle? What are the biggest challenges that we need to know about?
Because I'm gonna be completely honest, I'd rather learn the stuff like in person than rather it online, because I feel like I understand it more, or
Can he see? Thank you.
I understand it more and stuff like that.
Do you feel, Malik, do you feel more engaged when you're learning about topics that are interesting to you?
Yeah.
Do you feel your experience, do you feel educators are assigning lessons? Are they relevant to what your interests are?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Mike, this question is for you as an educator. What are the constraints that you are operating under when it comes to preparing and delivering instruction and assessment online?
So I found a big constraint was for a lot of our students, their technology is not reliable. So as a teacher, you really have to sort of prep and plan for those students who could possibly drop off of a lesson at any time. So I did an early survey with my students and found out that only about 40% of kids said that their internet access was strong and reliable. So educators are being challenged to kind of provide several different avenues for students to access resources and access lessons. Like we discussed before, we don't want to provide a situation that creates more anxiety for a student. So that's a big one, is just making sure if the technology isn't there, that they can still access lessons and still be a part of the class. Time is always a constraint. There wasn't enough time before this pandemic. So, really finding the time to create the resources to accommodate all learners. Obviously a unique situation. So we're trying to find the tools that are going to help to cut the workload of teachers. And also from the student standpoint, we're searching for technology that's going to lower those barriers for students and allow them to have the most robust education experience they can under these circumstances. And then I would say the biggest constraint is probably building relationships and being able to offer genuine feedback to our students. It's very difficult to establish two-way contact with a lot of our students. So it takes a little bit longer in this atmosphere. There's a lag when you're emailing students and checking in on them and calling them and not getting a response. So all of these little things that we took for granted, when we can just quickly check in with a child that's in front of us and have those informal conversations just to see how things are going, everything takes a little bit longer. So one thing that I started to do is what I'm calling feedback Fridays, and just having students kind of take a survey. How did your week go? Grade yourself. What are your reflections? Grade. I want them to grade me on how my lessons were, and I seem to be finding some success there. Just making those points of contact, which are so difficult now with a good portion of our students. It's definitely a challenge.
Well, we appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea, to solicit the student feedback and have them grade us. Jeremy and Malik are probably thinking, yeah, I'd like to do that, grade our teachers every week. Thank you for sharing that. Those are some great ideas. There's no doubt that this is a challenge. We heard from Malik. Online learning is no question, it's a struggle. Mike had presented some challenges. Now let's hear from our parent, Neil. What concerns do you have about your child learning online, and any issues they might be facing with burnt out or screen fatigue?
Well, for me, I have the whole spectrum of children at home. My youngest is in kindergarten. My oldest is in 8th grade. I also have a son in 6th grade as well. So that data that you put up there on the screen certainly is something that I can attest to and find that to be accurate, at least in the rural household, as it were. But I mean, for me, it kind of goes up as the concern of online learning. For my youngest, for example, the biggest challenge I face is it's not necessarily when the teachers are teaching a lesson online, she's engaged and she's locked in and she's participating and she likes it. She's 5, she's having a blast and she was looking forward to going to school, and that's a lot of fun for her. But over there in the corner of the room, that's her toys, her Barbies are over there. And that certainly isn't something that when you go face to face in school, that's not something that's available to her. So she tends to be more engaged, I would imagine, when she is face to face. So those distractions that everybody talks about, I certainly think is something that plays. The younger the child is, the more that's going to come into play. My oldest, on the other hand, he just wants to get his stuff done and move on. So, and to be honest, what I've noticed is getting a look at two different structures. And, I told you when I set up for this panel, when you ask a question, you'll get an answer. I have one student in a different school district that is strictly online. It's online all day. The class structure is the same as if he were in school, meaning school starts at 8:30. He's done at 10:15 with first hour. Second hour starts at 10:20. He does that, and it goes on and on throughout the day. My kids that are in districts that are going to, I guess you would say, the cohort-based learning, where sometimes they're not online for a lesson in the morning, and there's independent stuff that I have to get done with my youngest daughter, that if she's feeling motivated that day, she'll do it. But then other days she's not motivated, and it becomes more of a struggle. I can only speak for me. That's where the struggles are for me, in that when there is that downtime, especially for the younger students, there's not anything for them to grab hold of their attention to keep them going. I just think that, you either do it one way or you do it the other way. I feel like there's no room to mix it, because, you're putting teachers, I think, in an unwinnable situation where they have to burn the candle at both ends. And I don't think that's fair, to be honest with you, because then on the other hand, their attention's divided, then the student's attention is divided. And I think that's a real disconnect. And again, I have day-to-day experience with this. So that's something that I've noticed on my end. And, as far as, screen fatigue or burnout or anything like that, the only thing that I have to caution with myself, right? We're all parents here. We all care. We know that kids, we fight this screen battle every day of our lives, right? Because we didn't grow up this way. The way that our whole lives are screen based and interactive based and touch based, to where this is all our children are going to know. They're never going to deal with money, like that's tough for us to wrap our head around. And when they get done with school, he wants to play video games with his friends. Now, how can I tell you, hey, sit in front of this screen for 6.5 hours? But now, you get your 40 minutes of screen time and that's it. I feel as though there's a little bit of hypocrisy in that, and that's something that these are the battles we have to face as parents. So it certainly does make things tougher. There's no question about it. And I just feel like sometimes, most times we're putting these kids with the deck stacked against them, so to speak. So it's a bit frustrating from that perspective.
Yeah, well said. There are a lot of parents who are sharing very similar perspectives. You can just check out the local news, right? And you're hearing, thank you very much for sharing. Screen fatigue is definitely a challenge. Finding the balance. And I think you brought up an excellent point. We know that students they'll spend 2 to 4 hours a day, whether it's YouTube or video games, and how do you ask them not to do that after, or at least maybe an hour of enjoyment after spending all day online? Excellent points. Thank you for sharing that. So next question, learning from home. We're going to ask Christine to start this one off. Learning from home is a new experience for many of us, and experiencing it for the first time. Many families have experienced challenges along the way. The most frequently cited obstacles to virtual learning were distractions at home, per the survey that we were just looking at. 64% feeling depressed, stressed, and anxious. Over half of our students are whether they're online or coming in for one day a week, they're feeling depressed and stressed and anxious. So as a parent, I think the majority of families have felt this, whether it relates to school or working from home. But how has structuring the home environment been during this time of remote learning?
Is actually, you have a picture of it in your mind on how the structure is supposed to be. But with me, I go to work every day. So if I'm at work from 7 to 7, I hope that my structure is right. That's where I try my best to, I try to zoom into my kids' classrooms and see what they're doing in the classrooms while I'm at work. And we communicate, and I help them by them sending me text messages and me responding. I mean, it's been some valid points on when it comes to the internet problems, and then the distractions in the home as well. But when I'm at work, I can't help with that. I have to help by text, or being fortunate enough that I have my mom on some days that can keep them through the day, and then if they need help. But it's quite a bit of a struggle from a working parent, away from home working. Not saying that anybody, it's different. I've set their areas up where they can sit in their areas. I've made makeshift desks for them. But when I see them, when I call them on video chats, they're not sitting at those desks. They're in the bed, learning from in the bed. So it's kind of hard, but again, because I'm at work from sometimes 7 to 7, that it's hard to keep a complete structure on, okay, this is what I need you to do. They're very responsible when it comes to it. They do their best.
There's no question we as the educators can't do this without our.
That's how it's been so far.
Yeah, I was just saying there's no way we can do this without our adult learning partners helping out along the journey. You raised a very interesting point, Christine. I never thought about inviting the parents. Here is the go-to meeting. They have access to it, but feel free to hop in. I wonder. I'm almost curious on how that would come across through a variety of educators and how they would feel about that. I think that's interesting. I love that idea. Well, thank you for sharing that perspective. Liz, as a teacher, where do you feel your responsibilities have taken in remote learning?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin. It's just been such a whirlwind over the last 6 months. And I had to write down some stuff because I knew if I got in front of you guys, I would totally blank out. But I was just thinking about how much of a balance that word has already come up today. And I think that's such a strong word to use, is the balance, especially like when sending out information and work to your students. You have to be able to think about the students who are going to be your strugglers, and kind of create your assignments around making sure that they can feel successful, while also making them challenging enough for your high achievers to feel like they're getting a good push. And there's just so much. And the other thing I've noticed is that when you are delivering instruction on these live go-to meetings, you have got to be on your game, and you've got to be almost on stage and keep them entertained. And that's part of being a teacher, I think, is when you're at school, you're on stage too, but you can't miss a beat on these meetings, because if you do, their camera goes off or they're laying down, or so you really have to make sure that you're keeping them with you the entire time. But at the same time, like making sure you're taking all this curriculum and condensing it so that you can get enough out to them so that they don't feel like they're missing out. And what I've really noticed is that I cannot do this by myself. I really did have to rely on the parents to let me know when there's problems and reach out. And they became part of my tool to make sure that I was keeping kids connected and making sure they're on the right track, sending emails, constant communication. Oh, you need help with that? Let's have a quick go-to meeting. Hop on with me. That became a norm within all of this. And now that we're finally calming down a little bit and things are getting more of a routine, which I think has also been a huge help, is that you have to establish these norms within the face-to-face, within the go-to meetings, because if you don't, it's a mess. So when you establish these routines, you finally do have some like flow of these meetings, and the kids get used to it. And we have gotten there. But what I've noticed is that you have to keep it simple. Like I have to give directions as simple as possible on our It's Learning Management program. I have to make sure that the directions are all there, but it's not too much directions. It's easy for them to understand. It's easy for them to proceed, and they're not feeling overwhelmed. And that has been really tough. the prettiness, like the pictures and all the fun stuff, like that has to kind of go to the side. And it's just becoming a, here's what you need, here's what you're going to do, here's what you do when you're done. And I find that parents have like embraced that more than having, you know, little fun stuff, which I know that will come back when the time is right. But right now is more about just keeping things very clear and concise so that parents were feeling successful too. Cause I was disheartening getting all these emails from parents saying, I can't figure this out. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like a failure. And then I was feeling like a failure because they were struggling. So it's been definitely a challenge throughout this whole thing. But I have been so persistent about thanking them for their help because, again, I could not do without them, and just trying to give these kids a sense of accomplishment through all of this and not feel like what they're doing is not as important because it's not right next to me and face to face. There is something to be said about looking a child in the eyes, and I miss that part. But this is what it is, and we had to proceed. And I think it's been going okay. It is, I hate to say it, but it is what it is, and we've made the best of it. I feel like my teaching partner, who happens to be Neil's wife, we have worked our behinds off to try to make this the best experience we can for the kids. We have fallen, we have had good days and bad, but we're moving on. We're pressing forward. And I think that's the most important thing that we've learned through this, is that we'll be okay and the kids will be okay. We just have to make ourselves available and be flexible.
Well said. Jeremy, it sounds like your mom's working super hard, and I think she's doing a great job. Jeremy, as a student, how has school been for you? How is it different this year than any other year before?
I think that a lot of people, well, if
Okay, how's it been different this year?
the way it's been different is because that you're getting most of your work done at home, and some stuff just feels like homework because you're doing it all at home, and it just feels like homework.
That's not, you make it sound like that's a bad thing. That's not as fun, is it, to do it at home, is it?
No.
Now, when you're at school doing work, why is it? Tell us about when you're doing work at home, which doesn't sound nearly as fun as when you're doing it at school. Why is it so much more fun or enjoyable or different at school? Tell us what's going on.
You come face to face with your friends and actually being able to see your teacher and do work with your teacher and have fun with your friends, and you find
You're fine.
it's just become really easy at school. I mean, it's easy here, but I think I have more fun at school in face learning.
You're done.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's, it's interesting. There's a lot of students looking forward to getting back to school because working with their friends is usually, it could be easier for many students who like to collaborate and work with friends. And, and at the same time, going back to school right now could be very frightening experience for some students. It's interesting. There's a lot of different perspectives. There's another data point on the survey that I wanted to talk about. In this question, we're going to ask Jeremy, we're going to ask you and your mom, Liz, as a teacher, and Neil as a parent on this question. But going back to the data we heard about, on average, about half of students rated the relationships with teachers and adults in school positively, but only 1 in 3 rated their sense of belonging positively. And as Dr. Matt had shared, that's kind of a concerning number. Only 1 out of 3 students rated their sense of belonging positively. Jeremy, let me ask you this question. What does a positive relationship or a good relationship with a teacher look like to you? How would you describe what a good relationship with a teacher?
A good relationship with a teacher is what I see is that the teacher makes it make sense and makes it look easy. And when we do it, she tells us what to do and helps us with our struggles and encourages us to do what work she gives us.
That sounds like a really great answer and a great relationship between a teacher and student. Malik, I know I'm going to ask you a couple other questions, but would you mind weighing in on this one? I'm curious. I love to hear the student's voice. Malik, how would you, as a ninth grader, how would you define what a positive relationship with a teacher? What does that look like to you?
Hold on, I had my phone muted. I'm sorry.
Dude,
Can you
what
repeat
was the
it back
question?
to him?
Sure. Malik, we're curious on, from your perspective, what does a good relationship with a teacher look like or sound like?
I feel like a good communication with a teacher should be like where like you're comfortable to go talk to the teacher about stuff that like you need help with, or comfortable to go talk to the teacher about stuff like about anything really.
So
And, like,
somebody who's approachable,
yeah, somebody who's approachable.
somebody you can trust to share something with and feel
Yeah.
okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Liz, going back to that same data point of 1 out of 3 students feeling a sense of belonging, have there been any challenges establishing a rapport with students virtually as opposed to like you said earlier, looking them right eye to eye in the classroom? So what challenges would you say building a relationship virtually brings?
Oh, it's hard. It's very hard to build the relationships. I don't think it's impossible, but it's definitely a lot more legwork. My favorite day of the week is Monday because we have our Monday morning meetings where all of the kids come and just meet with me, because we usually meet as a fifth grade, but on Monday we meet with my class. And we just put a question out there. How are you doing this weekend? How did you show teamwork this weekend, whatever it might be. And it always sparks great conversation. And I get to see them. I don't get to see the curriculum side and what they're answering right, but I get to see a little glimpse into the kind of person that they are. And we only get to do that on Monday mornings. And then the other time I see them is when they're face to face, or when I meet with them on Friday, if they're the fully virtual students, for an hour. That is not enough. It's a start, but I miss those connections. Again, like I said, like having a student in front of you and being able to tell that they're having a rough moment by just looking at them and knowing, because you've gotten to know all their quirks, that is missing. Even when I'm teaching during the week, I can't see them all. I can't see all their faces. If I'm on the screen projecting, and I can't be scrolling while I'm projecting. So I do think it's definitely affected. That's why we have to reach out in different ways. After every meeting that we have, every go-to meeting, at the end, we'll say, okay, questions, concerns, stay after, and we'll meet with you guys. So we give them that opportunity to stay. And sometimes they just stay on and watch everybody else talk just because they want to feel connected. And we love that. And the hardest thing is saying goodbye. Is like, okay, guys, bye. And all you hear is bye, bye, bye. And everybody's click, 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 click. But they need that. They need to be able to see their friends, and it's definitely difficult, but we're making do. And I think the kids are adjusting, but they're going to be really happy when they go back to face. I really do believe that.
Agreed. Absolutely. Neil, as a parent perspective, is there anything you would add or share from your lens?
Yeah, I mean, for me though, it kind of goes back to what I talked about before, right? I mean, the kids and what they see and how they act, really, I mean, it's a mirror to their society, right? I mean, I think that the answer to this question is more broadly based on society right now as a whole. And then, you can bring in 100 different angles to this. I mean, the social media day and age that we live in now, where we judge our lives versus we judge every moment of our lives versus somebody else's highlight reel, right? Like that's, and right or not, I mean, we see that, and then that's kind of how we stack things up for ourselves about how we feel about ourselves. I mean, our children are no different. I mean, we look around, I'm sure they look around at what's going on at school right there too. And they do the same things that we do, because we're all people, man. We're all going to act the same. So, that to me, I mean, that's, we start with the way we all act as a society together, and then we just kind of break it on down from there. But I think in my opinion, that's really where it starts.
Yeah, and and thinking about this data, this was during the spring, after these students already had the ability to be in the classroom for months to build these relationships. Starting this school year virtually is a much different story. I mean, how did you we didn't even have the time to build those relationships. So yeah, I definitely think listening to the different perspectives on this, really we need to kind of take that into consideration as we move forward. This next question here, we have a couple more questions, and we're going to open up the any Q&A for any of our attendees who would like to ask. The next question we're going to ask Malik, Mike, and Christine. And it was one of the data points that Dr. Madden mentioned. Male students rated their health and well-being more positively than did female students. Talk to us about that. Malik, why do you think that is? Why do you think that male students rated their health and well-being more positively than female students? And if you say, I have no idea, I would understand. I would understand that. Malik, what are your thoughts on that though? And if you don't have any insight on why you think the male students are rated more positively, talk to us about what educators might be able to do to create a more inclusive and welcoming environment. What could we do as teachers to make sure that our male and female students feel included?
Jared, he just went downstairs for a minute. So
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna he said he needed to run downstairs real quick.
That's okay. That's okay. How about Jeremy? Would you, from the wisdom of an elementary student, we would love to know what your thoughts are. What could teachers do to make sure every student feels welcome and invited in a classroom?
They could include everyone in, make it feel fair, like have them work in groups more so they can have a chance together and all people can work.
Is there anything that any of your teachers might have done virtually that you think was a good idea that our educators can hear that might have made everyone feel included on a virtual meeting? Is there anything that you can think of?
Well, my teacher, Miss Basilisco, she has like this reel and she spins it, and whoever it lands on, that's the guy who gets picked to do a question or an answer.
Very good. We'll keep that in mind. Thank you very much. Mike, following up with that, how might educators ensure that students have a voice both socially and academically, whether virtually or in the classroom, face-to-face?
Well, I just want to say how tough it is to follow Jeremy, because I think all of his answers are spot on, and I'm loving the insight coming from him. Whether it's virtual or in the classroom, I think a lot of the UDL principles apply either way. I mean, I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel because we are virtual. So, providing multiple means for students to be able to share. And I think this is where we're seeing a lot of success in classrooms is, we can provide these low stakes moments for these usually quiet, introverted students to share in ways that are actually empowering them. Whether it's doing journals or anonymous polls or joining the chat. I got an email from a parent the other day that said she's noticed growth in her daughter who is usually very shy, and she feels, she's reaching out more. And no, she's not talking in class, but she's finding other ways to kind of communicate her ideas, and she feels good about it. And then using resources that represent individuals from all backgrounds, whether you're in person or virtual, you want to make sure your resources are reflective of the students sitting in front of you. That you want your students to see themselves in the material. So just being mindful of that. And then obviously making it personally relevant to students. I'm an economics teacher. I'm an econ nerd. There's nothing more I want to talk about than the deficit but I know that's not going to resonate with 16-year-olds. So, how do you create a story that is going to connect them and engage them and pull them into the lesson, and then you can kind of slip in the content. All of that is true regardless of the learning environment. So again, I don't think we have to stray too far from what we know. It might look a little bit different, but we're teaching in an incredible time when we've got so many resources and so many tech tools that that I think a lot of these students are latching onto and embracing. So there are options to have those moments of success. It's not going to work for everyone, and that's why we continue to search and try. But yeah, I think those principles are still incredibly relevant today.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing out, as we talked about a lot of challenges, there are a lot of positives that we're also learning from online teaching. I know my daughter had mentioned the other day, she absolutely loves, she's a junior in high school, and she says, I love the online learning. I can finish my work, and then I can decide what I want to do for the next 20 minutes. She feels that she's being very productive. And yeah, thanks for bringing that. I love the idea of providing multiple options for students to respond, whether it's a chat. Maybe some might choose to unmute their mic and speak verbally, where others might just be able to slip in the chat box. We all know, kids to adults, we all know texting is much easier for us to say something than verbally. I don't know why, but Christine, as a parent, just is there any perspectives? I don't know if I don't think I have the answer, but when we're talking about that data point where our young daughters, our young ladies might not feel, they didn't rate their health and well-being as positive as males. What would you say to our young ladies? What might we do to encourage, as educators, what might we do to encourage our young ladies to build their self-confidence? What would you suggest?
You know what? I don't know of any educator that I have met, especially being at Dove, that has not motivated any female or young lady to be the best that they can be. I personally don't like that, because I feel as though that girls can do better than boys can. As far as I'm concerned, girls rock. I mean, we rule.
You're right. That's a terrible data point. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know of any. I have never met an educator that has not tried to put anything positive in a female nor a male's head when it comes to achieving anything that they want to do or above. So for that study, I mean, I guess it's just numbers, but I've never met a teacher that hasn't tried to instill something positive in any one of the students to be better than what they feel as though. The teachers know. The teachers from day to day, like I tell my kids, when I drop you off at school, this is your other mom or this is your other dad, and I expect you to respect them, because they're gonna mold you to be the next president, architect, electrician that you want to be. So we have to work as a team on that one. So I don't know
Well,
where that study came from.
On behalf of all teachers, we thank you. We appreciate that comment. I concur. I believe educators are doing, and like you said, partnering with parents to do that the best we can for students. Last question of the day, and then we'll open up. So we'll see, Matt, if there's any questions in the chat box that we want to ask. But just really fast before we see what the questions are in the panelists. What was one takeaway? So if we can, what is one takeaway as you reflected on this experience that you think everyone who's watching this recording later or who are currently present, they need to know about your experience this fall around teaching and learning? Anybody's welcome to respond to this.
You say one takeaway?
One takeaway that you think everyone needs to hear from your experience this fall.
The one takeaway that I have is that everybody has a vision on how education should be. And we all have guidelines, and we have people to answer to. And although you might not see it and it's not going the way you want it to go, it's working for the best. You just have to trust and believe in the person that is overseeing your school.
Well said. Anybody else have a takeaway they'd like to share? Please.
This one, go ahead. What would you say? What is your one thing that you just told me?
We gotta do what we gotta do.
That's right. Roll our sleeves up and get it done. I like that.
And I'd like to add on to that, like at the end of last spring, I heard a lot of people saying that it was a wash and that the kids didn't walk away with anything, and that how are we going to do this in the fall? And I walk away saying it was not a wash. It might have been hard. It might have been challenging. It might have been new. There was ups and downs and it was crazy, and it might not have been as much, but it was still learning, and we still push forward, and we're still adjusting and making it better as we go. And there's only one way to go, and that's up. And we just have to keep rolling with the punches and be flexible and consistent and patient. That's my takeaway.
Yeah.
Well said. Anyone else? Well, Neil, please.
It's become apparent to me that, and I hope this is the case. I really, really hope this is the case. But for those of us that are adults, we know that sometimes that might not always be the case. But I really hope that across the board, decisions are made based on what's best for the children, not the way somebody feels or how they think it should be. Going back to what Christina was talking about, if it's not the way you think it should be, I just hope that decisions are being made by people that are in charge of making the decisions that very best benefit Malik, that very best benefit Jeremy, that very best benefit my kids and their development and their scholastic careers. And look, man, I mean the bricks and the foundation for their entire lives are being built right now. And I just hope that the people that make these decisions, I mean, these are huge decisions. I hope the people that make these decisions, they really have that at the bottom of their heart with what they're doing, because again, going back to it, this is what's going to shape their lives. There's no bigger statement in the world than that. I mean, and I just hope that everybody that is you talked about stakeholders, everyone that's a stakeholder in the decision-making process, please understand that if you're watching this now, if you're watching this later, if you're going back to watch it, understand that this is going to determine the path of people's lives, these decisions you make and the situations you set up. So treat it accordingly.
Awesome. Matt, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to try and synthesize a lot of stuff that's popped up in the chat and present questions to our parent participants, our teachers, and our students. So I'll start with the students. So it was brought up in the chat a lot that, this is different than any learning experience a lot of us had growing up. But for the students, it's presented this new opportunity to connect with their teachers virtually or digitally. And sometimes it can be hard to make an initial contact. I'll be honest, there's sometimes where I'd rather text a person than call them because it's an easier avenue to it. So when it comes to approaching your teachers, so this is for Malik and Jeremy, do you feel like in some cases it's easier to maybe email a teacher, or do you still prefer to be able to just go up and ask them a question face to face?
I feel like if it's about work, I'd rather go ask them face to face. Or if it's anything else like help wise or stuff like that, or anything else, I would email them. But usually, or I think that if it's about work, I'll go rather ask face to face, so like I have a better learning experience. Or I'd rather understand it better, running it face to face, where like somebody can show me like face to face without me looking like over a screen or over stuff like that.
Cool, thank you. Jeremy?
I would rather prefer going face to face because, well, if it's really important, you gotta, it's just really important, you gotta tell them. Emails might not go through, and talking will remain in their mind. Emails just won't go into their mind that much.
For sure. I've even had college students come to me and say they'd rather attend my office hours face to face. So I think a lot of students can definitely connect with what you both shared. The next question I have is for our teacher participants. The question is about just general flexibility, deadlines with assignments. So kind of putting together what a lot of people have said in the chat. Do you feel like learning remotely has encouraged you to be more flexible with students in terms of deadlines, how you grade, just understanding that, there are distractions, there are some barriers to remote learning. And that if we're going to fully utilize, what online learning allows us to utilize, do you think it's led you to be more flexible with deadlines and how you might approach other assignment or assessment options in your classrooms?
I can go first. Absolutely. Sort of the mantra in my class this year is health and humanity. So second chances, third chances, extending deadlines, being as flexible as I can. It's interesting because it took some convincing that this is true, this is actually happening, and this is my policy. I had a lot of students early on who were mad at me because they did not know the deadline. So you've got to be careful because some students, they want to plan their week, they want to get to work, they want to know when things are due. But absolutely, and frankly, it gets me in trouble with, probably members of my own department or within my PLC. But, we have to ask ourselves this is obviously not to say the most cliched line of the last 7 months, but we are living and working and learning in unprecedented times. So if we're not going to bend rules now, when are we ever, tell me a better situation where we should be bending rules? And again, based on feedback that I've received, it's definitely appreciated. More times than not, it's not students who are unwilling to do the work, but other things come up, other priorities, other classes, and oh, by the way, life. We absolutely have to provide them with opportunity to show us what they know under these circumstances, and if that means a day late, a week late, I am more than happy to extend. So I'm all for it.
Same as well. We do give due dates, we do give deadlines, but I'm really happy when I just get their work right now. Like, it's hard enough to try to get them motivated enough to turn things in, but I do think it's still important to give them those deadlines and like those due dates, because a lot of them really do thrive on it and they need to set up their schedule. And the ones that don't turn things in when they're due, it's not marked late. It's not, there's no points taken off or anything like that. But then it gives me an opportunity to reach out to parents and say, hey, is there something going on with technology? Are you having any problems with this assignment? Is there something I can help you with? So it's not a, oh, your kid didn't do this. It was a, how can we help you? And then it gives us a reason to connect with that parent, and the parent becomes aware of what's going on. And then we might learn if there's a situation going on at home or if things are rocky, and then we adjust to that. So again, it's all about that flexibility and just making sure that you're reaching out when you see that students are not doing the work that you're hoping they will. But also, again, just remembering it's life and there's a lot of stuff going on, and we got to remember their social emotional well-being first. That comes first.
Great, thank you. And then the last question from the chat is for our parents. So we know that learning from home has given you almost another full-time job as kind of being a facilitator of your kids' learning. But let's try and find one of the positive things that has happened, right? So Christina, you brought up that you're able to check in with Malik's classwork. I know every day when I would come home, my parents would ask me, hey, what did you learn in school today? And I'd always say, well, nothing. But, what can we take forward in terms of access and communication and making that home to school connection with parents? What would you like to see continue once we do have a return to more traditional schooling from the parent side?
Just that line of communication. I never want that line of communication to stop between the teachers and the parents, as well as the students as well. It's important because I think that when or if we do transition back into, everyday schools, that it's going to be it's going to be just as much of a change because you have those who will be coming in probably, as my son would say, from anxiety because he's scared of what the other kid may have. So just that communication and being supportive, that's my biggest thing. It's just don't stop the line of communication because the kids are back in the school, and that's about it.
Thank you. And Neil?
I mean, for me, it's a time thing, really. I mean, I as I talked about earlier, my daughter's in kindergarten. She's 5 years old. So being the, I guess I don't want to say the primary educator, I'll never take the role that a teacher takes, but just that time that I get with her, I never would have gotten this time before in my day-to-day life and through traveling for work and doing all this stuff. I never would have gotten this time. So, and that even extends to my other sons that are at home as well. I feel as though I maybe can have a little more impact on their day-to-day lives. And I've talked about how with my oldest son, about how this is more along the lines of what college is, where I heard people in here earlier today talking about the fact that they can get their stuff done. I think it was one of your daughters that you were talking about. I can get my stuff done and I can go, for 20 minutes, I can go do something else. That's how college works. I mean, in college, at least my experience in college was you do your lessons, the paper's due on Tuesday at 8 a.m. when you walk in the door, and they don't care how you get the paper done. They just care that the paper's done. And you know what I found in life, and you guys have probably found this too, my boss doesn't care how the job gets done. My boss cares that the job gets done and gets done well. So, I mean, through all this, that's the one thing that I do pull out of this is there's a little bit more of a real world implication into how real life is going to treat them. You're going to be responsible for getting this stuff done on your own. And there's not going to be, to be honest with you, that was the biggest problem I had in college was, I did get out of bed myself and go to class myself and feed myself. And, it's one of those things where they're getting a taste of that now. So if you want to pull apart some of the positives of it, A, the time that I get with my kids that I would never have gotten with my kids before, and B, they're getting more of a taste of how college and real life will work.
Well, we certainly talked about challenges tonight. We identified a lot of the positives. I think we had a lot of learning lessons as we continue to reinvent school, teaching and learning in Michigan. We appreciate all of our panelists, Jeremy and Malik. We appreciate our parents, Neil and Christina, and our educators, Liz and Mike, and a big shout out to all the educators across the board. Before we adjourn tonight, if we could just ask for our attendees to maybe respond to 3 quick questions using the chat box. As we engage in our network and learn session, which topics would you like addressed? As we drive our next conversation, our campfire chat, patio talk, what is it that you would like to hear about? Go ahead, feel free to put that in the chat box. Question 2, are there other ways that you would like to engage in conversations about UDL rather than this particular format? So you can think outside the box. Feel free to throw that in the chat box as well. And for our next Network and Learn, what might we do better to meet your needs as a learner, as a participant, as somebody we hope that walks away today with some good information? Also, as you're putting those responses in the chat box, we would like to invite Sue at this time just to mention a quick commercial for our next Great Lakes experience. Sue?
Thanks, Jared. I just want to mention briefly, if you'd like to learn more about UDL and you can't get enough, Network and Learn wasn't enough for you, we do have our 4th annual Great Lakes experience that is completely virtual this year. So if you'd like to join us October 27th and 28th, we're having Robert Dillon, who is a educational space design expert, Dr. Jay Marks, who is an expert on diversity and equity and culturally responsive design, and Kate Edgren, UDL expert, joining us to share how we can design better remote and in-person learning experiences so that all of our students are successful. So you can head to udl-irn.org/great-lakes to see more about the program and to register.
Thank you very much. And of course, I'm going to go back to our cameras so we could have a last farewell. And again, sincere thank you and appreciation to our panelists. Jeremy, it's 9:13. I feel your mom's going to kill me tomorrow. I bet staying up past your bedtime. Thank you, Malik. Thank you, Jeremy, for your insight. As students, we are walking away more informed, and hopefully the decisions that we make with Neil's input and Christina's input and our educators, I hope that we continue to do the right thing for kids, and all of our decision making is in the best interest of students. Thank you very much for our attendees and those listening at a later time. Give a good farewell, Jeremy, as you are heading off to wherever you might be heading off to. Malik, thank you guys very much. I just want to say we appreciate you.
And thank you, Jared and Matt, for putting this together tonight. We really appreciate all the effort you put into bringing these voices to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, everyone.